It's hard to ignore that childhood has changed in a lot of ways, and one of the most striking reasons is the role technology is playing in it. From the NPR network and KPBS, this is Screen Time, a podcast featuring conversations about technology and kids in today's digital age. Listen to Screen Time wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome in, San Diego. It's Jade Hindman. On today's show, the U.S. is at war with Iran. We'll talk about the global impact and what this means for our local service members. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. The United States and Israel's coordinated attacks on Iran from over the weekend continue to escalate. Among the ships involved in strikes include a San Diego-based aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln. 4 American soldiers have died in the conflict. San Diego congressional delegates Sarah Jacobs and Scott Peters decried the attacks, while Representative Juan Vargas said the president needs to immediately provide a briefing on the attacks and the long-term strategy to Congress. Also, Representative Darrell Issa expressed support for service members on X. It's a campaign President Trump says could take 4 to 5 weeks or far longer. But for many experts, it's still unclear what exactly the president's plans in the region are. Joining me to break it all down is Eric Gartsky. He's a professor of political science and director of the Center for Peace and Security Studies at UC San Diego. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Glad you have had the time today. Everybody's looking for clarity here. So first, what were your initial reactions to news of the attacks this past weekend?
Yes, well, I think like many people who are following the news, concern and confusion. It's not clear what the objectives are on the part of the White House and the administration in carrying out these attacks. They've given a variety of different explanations, some of which seem redundant from the attacks that happened last year, in which the president said that he had obliterated the Iranian nuclear capability. And others that seem to directly contradict what he campaigned on, where he said that the U.S. needs to avoid additional quagmire-type conflicts in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, is war an accurate way to describe this?
Well, people in my profession have a technical description, which is 1,000 aggregate battle deaths. That threshold probably hasn't been met yet, but it looks very likely that that will be the case between the 4 or 5 or maybe now it's 8 different warring entities as the days and weeks ahead progress. The president is saying 4 or 5 weeks. We don't know when this will end, in part because we have no idea what the objectives are or how they will be met.
Yeah, I mean, because how has Trump justified these attacks? I mean, up to this point, what's his what can you guess about his objective here?
Well, the objectives keep shifting. One of the problems the White House has and the president has in communicating with us and with Congress and with the Iranians, the foes, are that he has a integrity problem. He's not well known for his honesty or candor, and he also tends to shift what he thinks about things from moment to moment. So it's really tricky if you think in your own life about how to deal with somebody. It's really tricky to deal with them if you don't know what they want. So even if the Iranians were predisposed to accommodate some of the demands that the U.S. has, it's not clear that they know what those demands ultimately are.
Mm-hmm. What are the American people supposed to do with that, you think? I mean, in terms of, no clear objectives, coupled with, maybe media not having as much access to information from the White House about what's going on. I mean, what does this look like to you? What are people supposed to do with this information that we are getting?
Yeah, absolutely. I think unlike many other issues that are very divisive today, there might be a substantial majority of the American people that can see eye to eye on this conflict because the many of the people who voted for Donald Trump in the last election voted for him because of his avowed position in opposing foreign entanglements and claimed to be want to be the peace president. Well, they should be talking to their representatives and to the White House, letting them know that this is not what they voted for. And those who voted against Trump, maybe many of them would have been in opposition to this conflict in any case. So they can also remind their representatives that open-ended conflicts in the Middle East, America doesn't have a good record with these. They end up killing Americans. They end up killing people in the Middle East. And often after a very long and expensive process, we end up deciding that they're not going anywhere that we want to be.
Well, among many questions being asked about the attacks is, did the president need congressional approval for them? KPBS military and veterans affairs reporter Andrew Dyer spoke with San Diego Congressmember Scott Peters this morning about that question, and here's some of what he had to say.
It is the constitutional requirement of that Congress declare war. The president has referred to this as a war. I'm going to go back tomorrow and hope to get the briefings that we want. I think we're going to vote on a war powers resolution that says you got to come to Congress before you start a war and put our men and women in harm's way. And the point is not just for permission, but it's to explain to us, why this is needed now and what the end game is.
So what do you make of all that, of the president entering the U.S. into what he calls a war and doing so without congressional approval? This action never went up for a vote by Congress.
Yeah, I think that Congressman made the point very well. I have a former PhD student, Patrick Hume, who wrote a wonderful dissertation on war powers and made the point that not since Truman in 1950 has there been a successful large-scale use of military force without congressional authorization. They tend either to be smaller affairs or they tend to be unsuccessful. And so the risk here is because we're not clear about what the end game, and I'm using language from back in the day, but in the aftermath of previous conflicts, we started as a country to talk about the need to have an end game in a conflict. We can't know what the end game is if we don't even know what the end would look like.
Right.
So this is dangerous. As long as this is constrained to striking Iran's nuclear capabilities, or maybe some, as has happened, striking their conventional capabilities and their leadership. If we're going to define the goal as weakening, blunting Iran's military power and its political cohesion, we can walk away from this in 4 or 5 weeks, and there will be an argument either way about war powers. The truth of the matter is there's no description of any urgency for why this had to happen without congressional authorization or even informing Congress. There have been crises in the past where the U.S. government had to move quickly because of information that they had. But generally speaking, they try to inform key members of Congress, even if they don't go for open debate and formal authorization of the use of force.
One reason for this action seems to be regime change. He mentioned that in his address over the weekend, late Friday night, early Saturday morning. And in that address, he was saying, it's time for you to take over your government. But who was he talking to when he said that? I mean, have we been in communication with a group in Iran about regime change, or?
Well, I wouldn't be privy to that information. Presumably, it would be carried out by the intelligence community and it would be classified. But to kind of answer your question more directly, it's entirely possible that there's opposition. It's very likely there is opposition to the Iranian Islamist regime. You will recall going way back 25 years ago, The pretext that the then Bush administration gave for invading Iraq was that they had had some communication with dissident groups in Iraq and that they wanted to carry out regime change. It later changed to weapons of mass destruction because it turned out that it was illegal under international law to carry out forceful regime change, and it remains illegal today.
Also, the president, as you've mentioned before, seems to really be offering up mixed messages and workshopping different timelines with the media for these attacks. What does this signal to you about his approach to this conflict?
Well, the president has, in addition to an integrity problem and a communication problem, the president has a confidence problem. His approval ratings are among the lowest that have been recorded in modern survey research going back 70 years. One explanation that people in my community use on occasion for situations like this is called diversionary war, or known as wag the dog. It may be that with the combination of the Epstein files, the unpopular use of immigration enforcement, and other issues that have made this president and this administration very unpopular with the American people, that the president is looking for some way to get through the midterm primaries, which are beginning to happen right now, um, with a little bit more public support. And there is usually a bounce that an administration gets out of a foreign policy crisis.
Hmm. Well, I want to talk about here locally. I mean, here in San Diego, we've got a large military community. How do you anticipate the war affecting the lives of San Diegans?
Well, we have the largest uniform population in the United States living in and around San Diego, and many, many of those folks are now deployed to the Middle East. You mentioned in the intro that one of the carriers that are based here is in the Middle East. That's 5,000 Americans floating in the Mediterranean or in the Persian Gulf somewhere. So many of us will know or have family members that are serving in the military, and already we have three, possibly four Americans that have been killed in the region. Others are injured. So this is going to affect Americans in San Diegans in particular because they're going to lose loved ones and friends. We're also seeing the effect at the gas pump. While America produces more oil than it needs, the energy economy is global, and things that disrupt the energy economy are going to affect everybody. We're going to pay at the gas pump for this decision to use force thousands of miles away in the Middle East.
Even though this is happening thousands of miles away in the Middle East, is there a chance that Americans may be subject to some sort of an attack here on this land?
Well, yes. One of the things that Iran is relatively capable of doing, has invested in, is cyber attacks. Um, I think as this conflict goes on, the Iranians are going to pull out all the stops because they're losing the military power and political cohesion that they've invested in so heavily. So we may find that some of our institutions are attacked with cyber attacks. You may occasionally, it may be various different kinds, and that's a whole sort of separate issue. But that's one way in which it would affect Americans. It probably won't kill Americans, but it might inconvenience them. And then, of course, the longer this conflict uh, persists, the more it will do things like snag transportation networks. And ultimately, um, the Iranians back a variety of different terrorist organizations in the Middle East, and they will maybe, uh, I don't wish this, I don't, I'm hoping otherwise, but these are organizations that are good at causing mayhem.
So there are a lot of consequences that could come from various directions to all of this, and big impacts here in San Diego as well. Well, Professor, this is something that we'll continue to cover, and I appreciate your time today. I've been speaking with Eric Gartsky. He's a professor of political science and director of the Center for Peace and Security Studies at UC San Diego. Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
I'm Lawrence K. Jackson, host and producer of the San Diego News Now podcast. It's a daily podcast airing every morning. We cover news pertaining to all 18 cities in the county, weekend events, and even some casual conversations. You can listen to the San Diego News Now podcast wherever you get your podcasts.